O Roma, nomen tuum epitome hominis occidentalis est. Verba tua ardor incarnatus sunt, ambitio tua, vocatio tua. Ne exercitus quidem elusi gloriae tuae comparari possunt. Or something of the sort. I can't speak Latin and I've never studied it, and all I have to translate this really is Wiktionary and Wikipedia, so the gist of my message anyway. Rome was great, but let us suppose it greater, more natural, if you so will. Now, Rome was a vast multicultural empire at its height, so looking at its natural borders in any manner of irredentism is a bit silly. Nevertheless, we can adapt some elements of traditional or more modern irredentism, that is the greater nation ideology, to our Rome. Based on historical grounds, then round the whole thing out with the natural limits found in the world, mountains, seas, rivers and so forth. So what is Rome really? Well, at its very heart it is the nation of the Romans, the chief of whom are the Latins in what is nowadays Italy, and the Hellenes in what is nowadays Greece. The Latins, quite naturally, reside chiefly on the Apennine Peninsula, cut off by the Alps in the north and the Mediterranean all around. But of course one must also recognize the total dominion that the Latins held over not only the Tyrrhenian Sea, but also the Adriatic. Now, the former is rather obvious. The Latins made up most of the population of the islands of Sicily, Sardinia and Corsica, these lining the Tyrrhenian waters. The latter sea, though, is a bit less obvious, but I base that claim on the fact that the Latins settled Illyria, or Dalmatia, or Croatia, whichever you want to call it, rather early on in Roman history, this again lining the extent of the waters. Unlike with the Tyrrhenian islands, though, we must expand the Illyrian border to some more defensible extent on the continent. The quite natural choices I find are from the north to east to south, the Drava, the Danube, the Great Morava and the Drin River, with the Alps and the Macedonian mountains filling in some of the minor gaps. This region, this province, we shall call Dalmatia. On to the Hellenes. Their extent is also rather obvious. Their core is in Achaia, in the main peninsula of Greece today. But they also naturally expand over the regions of Epirus, as well as over Macedonia, over Crete, over Cyprus, and of course over the islands in the Aegean and around Achaia. Of course, the Greeks of modernity and the Hellenes of antiquity were far more broadly settled and linguistically prevalent than this. But momentarily let us stay in the abstractly more central regions of Hellas, around the Aegean Sea that is rather. To that end, naturally Hellenic lands are Thrace, Bithynia, Mysia, Ionia and Lycia, but where to draw their boundaries is a tad more difficult a feat. As for Thrace, while the Rhodopes draw a natural limit to its western neighbor province, nothing really stands out in modern-day central Bulgaria to draw the northern line of Thrace. So to mend that aspect, let us simply extend the Hellenic sphere of influence up to the Danube in the north, creating the provinces of Moesia Superior and Inferior. For the rest, the provinces in Anatolia, that is. The Sakarya River and the Anatolian highlands shall serve us well enough for now in the creation of the provinces of Bithynia, Asia Minor and Lycia. On to other matters. Though Rome was a vast empire, it was more than an empire of the Latins and the Hellenes. It was also the empire of the peoples and empires the Latins and the Hellenes subjugated during Roman history. On the other side of the Mediterranean, in Africa, it would be totally silly to forget Rome to have subjugated the great empires of Carthage and of Egypt. In the spirit of the East-West divide, let us suppose the former a conquest of the Latins and the latter of the Hellenes. Carthage was an empire centralized in modern-day Tunisia, so therefrom we shall start expanding it. Now the Sahara Desert provides a most fortuitous southern border, as no one lives in the desert, and certainly no army is going to march through thousands of kilometers of desert just to flank the Romans. But for the western and eastern borders we must suppose something more concrete than mere plains or desert. To the west, to replicate other Roman conquests of history, we really ought to expand the Carthaginian portion of the empire to the Atlantic, with the seas providing most of its defensibility, and the Atlas Mountains the rest. In the east we have Roman Egypt, so, fair. As for Egypt proper, well, the nations always followed the Nile, and so shall we suppose here, its reach being between the Red Sea and the Sahara all the way down to Ethiopia, where it meets the Ethiopian highlands. Stretching it further down the Nile would be, simply put, a bit too overambitious for now. Forthwith we need to return to the Latins and the Hellenes proper, and their grander influence over the lands of the former Roman Empire, in a more linguistic sense. To the west, the Latins rather early on conquered and settled much of what is nowadays the Latin world, France, Spain and Portugal. Now the Iberian Peninsula functions in every regard as an island to us here, fully surrounded by defensible seas or friendly Roman lands. But to the expansion into modern France we need to give more thought. Initially one might jump to rivers such as the Garonne or the Rhône, perhaps the Seine in modern central France, but really, why not just jump straight to the Rhine here and include all of Gaul to Rome in the provinces of Narbonensis, Aquitania and Lugdunensis, as well as of Belgica and Raetia and Germania Inferior and Superior. In the east for the Hellenes one must rather naturally acquiesce linguistic dominion over the Anatolian Hittites and the Semitic peoples of western northern Arabia, that is rather Syria and Canaan in antiquity, these regions being lined by the Lesser Caucasian mountain range and by the Arabian desert respectively. Of course the Romans, in addition to conquering great empires of that time and settling to create vast linguistic syncretic zones, the Romans also famously quarrelled with the greater civilizations and lesser empires of that time, the Germanics and the Mesopotamians I mean here. In all honesty, drawing a border to include Germania is dull because it's largely so obvious. The border shall be moved from the Rhine to the Elbe, whereafter it meets with the Alps in Raetia by travelling along the western mountains of what is nowadays Czechia, naming that part which lies within Roman borders as the province of Germania Antiqua. Of course, though, we could neuter the Germanic threat further by including the rest of modern Germany, all of the Jutland Peninsula, and the western half of modern Poland into Rome, by drawing the border yet further to the east to the Vistula and San rivers. You know what, I like that idea. Certainly makes Rome a greater threat to the Goths in Eastern Europe as well. To name the new regions, we shall call Jutland by the name Kimbrica, the rest of Germania as Germania Magna, and Czechia as Boiohaemum. As it is such a greater Germanic acquisition into Rome does paint an awkward line as a border in the Balkans. So let's expand Rome's influence over the rest of the Balkan by drawing the line in the east to along the Carpathian Mountains, extending to the Danube just southward, naming these lands Pannonia and Dacia. Let us consider the syncretic experiment within Rome though. In the west, the Latin world of our day was once part of the Gaelic world. The two language families, the Celtic and Romance languages, are debatably related anyway, so that's more fuel to the fire of our argument here. What I'm getting at is this. We've hitherto included the continental Gaelic world, but one portion of that world remains, the British Isles. While the Romans only ever conquered what is most of Britain, we shall expand Roman dominion over the entirety of Great Britain and Ireland, or rather Hibernia. With what we have though, we are way too Western Roman biased now, so looking to the east, we should naturally draw the Hellenic zone of the empire over the rest of Mesopotamia, and rather in the same breath, the northern extent of the easternmost border from the Lesser Caucasus to the Greater Caucasus, with the east being marked by the numerous mountain ranges in Persia. Still though, we are too Western biased, so let's expand the east to where there is little resistance. First of all, the Sea of Azov was partially settled by the Hellenes in antiquity, so I think we should express that in some regard. Now as the Scythians settled that surrounding area, to actually expand Rome there is a bit difficult in light of the European plains and lack of natural defensibility. So in that spirit, and to tip our hats to history, let us create Regnum Bospori, the Bosporan kingdom, around the Sea of Azov as a Hellenic client state. Its core shall be the defensible Crimean Peninsula. But in addition, let us include all land surrounding the Sea of Azov and draw its continental borders along much the extent of the rivers of the Dnieper, the Samara, the Donetsk, the Don and the Kuban, thusly. The next region of least resistance is Arabia, as eastward lay Parthia. To that former end, the Arabian desert is an absolute pain to hold, and even more of a drag for the empire. The coastal regions, though, are most fine lands, comparable to all others of the empire. Now as we reach modern-day Qatar and Yemen though, we encroach on a generally time-appropriate challenger, the Parthians, who for some reason held dominion over southeastern Arabia for quite a long time before Islam and all that. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting real sick of these Parthians. So let's just say that Julius isn't assassinated or something, and in all of his brilliance easily topples the entire Parthian Empire in conquest, subsuming it into Rome. Of course, the Hellenes controlling that region would be preposterous, so it's time to create a third Rome, calling this one the Eastern one, and the Greek one the Oriental one. Eastern Rome shall be based in Syria, and its chief language shall be Parthian. Naturally though, Rome's legions would not stop at Parthia. They have to get home somehow, because that's how invasions worked in the olden days, didn't they? Invade until you're back home. Be as it may, if Rome truly is mighty enough to topple Parthia, it should be no issue at all to topple the peoples of what is nowadays southern European Russia. Though no real major power opponents remain in the neighboring regions of Rome in these new conquests, we'll draw Rome's boundaries much per the Sea Daria, Volga and the Daugava rivers, to have some semblance of naturality to them. And with that, we have our Rome, our natural Rome, not the least exaggerated, no.